This is a message from the Japanese Ministry of Health. If you are immune compromised or in any way in a high-risk category, you must, as soon as practically possible, get a blood test and find out your blood type in case of urgent hospitalization due to COVID-19. This critical information will be passed on to hospital staff so they can know what kind of personality you are. Act now, especially if you suspect that you are type O, as you are easygoing and unpunctual by nature.
Welcome back to Japan by River Cruise. I'm Bobby Judo.
And I'm Ollie Horn.
We have a guest joining us tonight. It's Derek Wessman, an 18-year resident of Japan who runs an interpretation, translation, and consulting company, is a former aide for the Japan House of Representatives, a volunteer firefighter, and he won the coveted second prize for the annual Asakawa Riverboat Hamburger Vendor Awards in 2007.
Yes, but we are obliged to point out, of course, that 2007 was the year in which 80% of the famous hamburger boats were destroyed in a rash of suspicious fires, none of which the local fire brigade helped to extinguish.
Nice to have you joining us, Derek.
Yeah, nice to be on, guys.
Great. So on today's show, the U.S. approves a $1,200 per person stimulus package, and Japan announces that they'll be sending each household 2 surgical masks. To be fair to Japan, though, in the US right now, $1,200 will only buy you 1.5 surgical masks. Also, Ollie's got your river cruise recommendation. Yeah, Ollie?
Yes, this recommendation is a Kobe-based cruise who is following this new government safety guideline and economizing by issuing each family boarding the cruise 2 life jackets per cruise, irrespective of whether there are more than 2 family members boarding the cruise and ignoring whether the family needs the life jackets in the first place. First come, first served.
Plus, you may know him as Mr. Miyagi, but we know him as the leading Japanese-American advocate of Japanese river cruises. We reached out to Pat Morita to get his top 3 cruise courses. Turns out he's been dead for 15 years. More on that later, but first, Soap Talk.
Bobby Judah, how's your week been?
I'm doing okay. Work is picking up again. I got a new job. I am writing a column on child rearing.
Oh, cool. Are you allowed to do that while immune compromised?
I can do it from home. And just like this podcast, I mean, everything is done online. So for the listeners who don't know, we are very responsible. We have always done this podcast sitting at least 6 feet away from each other.
Fully remotely.
Derek, where are you in Japan?
So I'm in Hachioji City, which is on the west side of Tokyo. Most people don't know if it's in Yamanashi or some other rural place, but that's where I'm at.
It's still technically Tokyo, or?
It's Tokyo's Tibet, is I think what most people around here say.
You were tweeting in Japanese about the incredibly unreasonable proposition that foreigners who live in Japan should be included in the Japan stimulus package, which they're debating right now, right?
Right. And, it's weird because I don't usually tweet a lot in Japanese. And also, I don't tend to complain about Japan that much. I tend to really like Japan and just what's going on here. So
wrong podcast. Wrong. Sorry, we're gonna have to let you go.
Yeah, I actually came on to just sabotage you guys.
And you this was in response to a lawmaker who basically said we shouldn't use the My Number system in order to hand out the stimulus package because some foreigners have a My Number. And
exactly,
she didn't think about the fact that these foreigners might have also paid more into the tax system than someone who's Japanese born, and might also be employing Japanese people, or might, or irrespective of who they're employing, might need a stimulus so their business doesn't go under. Right,
and she also forgot that she was born in the United States, which was a funny part of the whole story.
Which is weird because, there are absolutely no xenophobes in the United States, are there?
Right, exactly. I mean, she was born in that open bastion of liberalism. So, the funny thing is, she suggested that was a problem, and so I just kind of tweeted about it. And I don't like to tweet seriously very much myself, especially politically, and so it was weird. I'm still getting all of these retweets and stuff from people that I probably wouldn't usually agree with in different other areas. Yeah.
What kind of pushback have you, what have been the responses?
Oh, the biggest pushback has just been, there are foreigners who fraudulently receive welfare benefits And I'm like, yeah, like how Japanese people do too.
Yeah, number one, Japan is super famous for all the welfare benefits that they give out, right?
But the seikatsu hogo is a thing. It's a ridiculous argument. My whole thing was just, hey, it really doesn't matter what nationality. Crappy people are crappy people, and hardworking people are hardworking people, etc.
Well, I think any of the xenophobic arguments that you see against foreigners having a say in Japanese politics, or against what rights we can afford to foreigners, or how long we should allow foreigners to stay when they're here as laborers, or in like the nursing industry or the healthcare industry.
Yeah,
they want to arrange it so that it's in the best interests of Japan, and it's what's best for Japan, and they don't really give that much thought to the foreigners' rights. And it's like, yeah, but those foreigners are paying into your social security. Those foreigners are paying their taxes. Those foreigners are supporting, in a lot of ways, Japanese people or Japanese families.
Yeah.
It's this transactional notion of citizenship, isn't it? That, well, if you're buying into the system, if you're doing things our way, then we will afford you something in return. Exactly the same thing happened in the UK, where nurses who have a visa to work in the UK, if their visa is due to expire in October, their visa is automatically going to be extended so they can continue to risk their lives on the front line. And this is seen, in my view, wrongly, as a progressive thing that the government's doing. Yeah, no questions asked, we extend your visa. Or actually, it plays into this transactional notion of,
as long as we need you. Yeah.
Right. And, and thankfully, Bobby's earned his place. Japan needs white people on TV to tell them what to do.
Yes,
exactly. And one thing that I guess we should say is most people are not taking this idea seriously. That her view does not represent the mainstream view.
Exactly. Yeah, and the funny thing is, I was an aide in the Diet, and I was an aide to a person who's very conservative LDP politician. And
I'm sorry. No, Bobby gave me a look as if to go, I think Ollie needs some aid with his diet, but he didn't make that joke. He just gave me the look.
It's like even those guys, even the most conservative old farts are not even, trying to suggest that. So it is just a very small percentage of people. It just pissed me off at the moment.
But there is a general sense, I think, that things which countries have always wanted to do, or rather some lawmakers have wanted to do, close borders, give out conditional handouts to citizens, track their data, or whatever it is, having some threat, especially when the threat is existential, is a convenient way to do so. And I do get the sense in Japan that there are some people who are jumping on the foreigners brought this virus in bandwagon. And this maybe just provides a way for them to articulate what they were already thinking. And this just provides a means for them to do so.
I saw a statistic that some Japanese person had retweeted on Twitter that it was the number of new cases of corona infections per day, and they had broken them down by which ones were Japanese nationality and which ones were igai no kokuseki, of a nationality that's not Japanese. And the number of non-Japanese was always higher. And so each day it's growing, but there's always a higher number of non-Japanese people on that day who came down with it. And underneath this statistic, they had written, what country even is this? And I thought that was like hilarious for not only the xenophobia, but also for like the implied message, which is like, there should be more Japanese people than foreigners getting infected.
We're getting our asses kicked here. Come on. The dumbest responses I'm getting to that one tweet are actually people who are like, no, we like you. It's just these other foreigners that are causing all the trouble. And they're obviously talking about like people from Asia. And it's like, there goes the whole white guys in Japan we're fine with. That whole BS I really dislike.
Let's go ahead and look at our mail this week. We've got a mail from a Brian. This is Brian in Fukuoka, and he writes... An actual Brian. One of the best podcasts as of yet, guys, and it had nothing to do with Bobby's potentially life-threatening diagnosis. Brian, thank you for the message. I find it pathetic. This is just the worst kind of sycophancy.
We don't do this for your praise.
Yeah, no, it's this kind of annoying message that made us have to cancel our 14th podcast. Brian, fuck you, Brian.
We are going to say thank you for the message, only because that message was accompanied by money. Say, if you want to give us sycophantic praise, for goodness sake, do so with enough money that barely covers our hosting fees.
Thank you for that, Brian. We appreciate it.
We do actually appreciate that. And we actually had 2 other people donate. One was an anonymous coffee. I'm still going to drink it. I'm desperate. And the other was Bobby Judo's biggest fan. So much of a fan, they spelt your name Booby Judo.
Nice. It was our most listened to ever episode, I think. Maybe not most ever, but most in like the first week. And I think it was because I potentially had the coronavirus. So in that spirit, Ollie, you're horribly sick this week, right?
Yeah, I have had the coronavirus. Undiagnosed, because unlike you, I was already out of work, so didn't need a confirmation to go back to work. But I've been diagnosed over the phone. I didn't get the test, but I had all the symptoms, and the 2 symptoms. Well, so firstly, I sent the symptoms to my brother and my dad. My brother's a vet, and my dad's a doctor, and I kind of straddle between human and animal in my lifestyle. So I thought I'd get both opinions. And I said, well, firstly, I've never had this before. I've had like terrible aches in my legs. I've just got this like crazy fatigue. And my brother just responded with, that could just be your BMI. I was like, okay, fine. I said, does that mean that the virus has made me fat? And he goes, no, that would be the brownies. Because of course I tried to create a vaccine for the coronavirus by using flour, butter, sugar, eggs, and cocoa powder. But it just ended up being brownies. But anyway, it's a horrible thing to have. I've genuinely not had symptoms like it.
Generally, you've had a low-grade fever for like 4 days, and you're having trouble breathing, right?
Yeah, the scariest one is it's like someone's giving a very mean hug. You can't breathe, like your chest doesn't open up properly. And I had one night where I kind of woke up gasping for breath, like I didn't breathe enough during my sleep, and that woke me up. And that was a bit scary. But, having the coronavirus and dying that way, I think is a more dignified way of committing suicide. So I wasn't that bothered. But I am feeling better. And I'm glad to say that we can put a clickbait title on this. Has Ollie died from the coronavirus?
Well, we're glad that you're still here. If not, it was just going to be me and Derek. Nobody would be around to talk over us.
Let's go to the news. Huge week in the news. Main news is the Japanese entertainment industry has me as part of it. I'm still alive. But what it doesn't have is Shimura Ken.
Yeah, I think they're not so much concerned with having you. I think they're mostly reeling from the loss of Shimura Ken, especially because he passed away from the coronavirus, which has been one of the things that's made them take it the most seriously so far. But on top of that, he was also it's kind of impossible to overstate how big of a presence he was in the Japanese entertainment world, in the comedy world. And I think, Derek, I know you saw this on Twitter when you tweeted out that he had passed, and you got some responses almost immediately about how his comedy was problematic.
Right. I mean, I think in recent years, and that's the only time I've really spent time watching TV, is since I've had kids in Japan, and so the TV's just kind of on. And he's just had this cute show where he has this monkey in overalls hanging around with him. So I just kind of tweeted, they lost a big icon. And then people were saying, but back in the 80s, like his shows were all about like big-breasted women in bikinis, kind of being objectified and stuff like that. I was kind of surprised. I didn't know that. I
think a lot of people tend to think that the Japanese comedy is still very much based on like gag humor and slapstick and like below the belt humor and kind of sexual humor and things like that. And he really was kind of iconic in terms of doing those kinds of things. One of the things that he's most famous for is the Henna Oji-san character. It was just this weird Oji-san who would wander around and be in weird situations, and people would call him a Henna Oji-san.
Which means like a creepy old guy, right?
Yeah. And he had a song and a dance that went with it, and that was his catchphrase. Looking back on a lot of his stuff, it's really interesting because a lot of it involves, these sketches where the humor is not from something that's happening in the sketch. The humor is that the audience is watching a sketch that actors are playing, and in whatever the situation is, his character is like feeling up a woman. And it's not that it's a humorous situation, it's that they know that the actress is struggling to try not to go "Kya," or like she's struggling not to break character and endure sexual harassment.
Well, I think so. I think you're right. I mean, we ought to explain this isn't his main canon of work. I think he's like his legacy is probably going to be basically inventing the America's Home Videos format. He was the one that presented that show where people would send in funny clips, right? Like he basically created YouTube. If you want to aggrandize him, like I think he's famous. He's going to be famous for way more than that. But you're right. That kind of Benny Hill-esque smutty stuff. I think the reason why it's very easy to say it's problematic now because now we wouldn't allow that on TV. And I do think it's appropriate to judge him by the standards of the past, right? Because maybe he was more progressive than the average comedian of his time. Plus, if you do watch these sketches, it's obvious that he's acknowledging that what he's doing is weird. He's not seeking to normalize the behavior, right? He's seeking to.
There's the argument to be made that presenting it as a joke does normalize it. But I think saying his comedy is problematic, which I think a lot of it was. I don't think all of it was. I think some of the tropes that he used were, but that doesn't diminish his importance as a figure in Japanese culture and in Japanese comedy.
Exactly. I think it's what I was trying to convey in my tweet, which was just, how Tom Hanks just got over the coronavirus? Well, this really big icon didn't. So you can imagine how Japan feels was kind of my logic. And then people are like, oh, well, it shouldn't be Tom Hanks. It should be Robin Williams, blah, blah, blah. But he was just huge to Japan. That's the thing that matters.
The reason why I think foreigners could understand his humor is that he was, as a physical comedian, also quite, dare I say, understated. So that is to say, he did these big wacky things, but a lot of his humor came from creating little moments of absurdity. And the first thing that I saw of him was the sketch. It's a super famous sketch where he's an English teacher correcting native English speakers on their English pronunciation, getting it wrong. And what's funny is that joke, he does the same joke about 8 times with different people, but each time he brings just a very small little nuance in the acting, and I think that's what set him apart. So I think that comparison to Robin Williams is correct, that he probably was first and foremost a physical performer.
The other thing that he's actually really similar to Robin Williams, if you go back to the Benny Hill, the smuttiness, the now politically incorrectness. If you watch like clips of Robin Williams being interviewed by Johnny Carson or somebody, like his whole shtick was like making fun of gay people's voices and like people's accents and stuff.
Shimura Ken's death has kind of gotten the public really focused on the corona cases and the seriousness of them. They're doing a lot more testing, and they found out that the cases are skyrocketing. I mean, they continue to be on the rise. I think Tokyo logged the largest number of increase in cases in one day, every day for like the past 3-4 days. And we're seeing a lot of clusters pop up. Ollie, you found some news about a cluster in Osaka?
I found a fascinating cluster in Osaka, which was linked to a hostess club. And what really attracted me to this story was there's so much shame in Japan about getting ill. And the headline of the news article said, a cluster of cases, I think 18-ish cases, were found linked to a certain night spot. But the headline was, but the owner of the night spot refuses to publish their name. That is to say, we're reporting on this story, but we're not going to tell you what the night spot was. And this is like, there was somebody very high profile who, I think it was a sports player, who got the disease and issued an apology for having gotten the disease, as if it was kind of his failing of his personal failing.
Soccer player.
There have been soccer cases. There have been cases in Japanese baseball. I think a baseball player tested positive in the last couple of days. But yeah,
if you go to a hostess club and the worst thing that happens is you come out with a mild flu, and I think you've done quite well.
They did a piece on Asadesu about how it was affecting the industry in Fukuoka, the red light district, and the nightclub industry and the hostess club industry. And customers were down. Not only were customers down, but like in Nakasu, there are all these fruit shops nearby that sell the super expensive fruit that their business is customers buying fruit for the hostesses. So there are all of these related businesses that, because the hostess club business is suffering, their business is suffering as well. But they went in and they were talking about, what they were doing, and all the girls are wearing masks, and, they've got the hostess club booth set up so that they're socially distanced Hostess Club booths, and they had alcohol sanitizing spray in these little like perfume bottles, fancy perfume bottles that this hostesses would spray for you to sanitize your hands every 10 minutes.
This seems like a massive business opportunity for Soaplands to actually live up to the name and repurpose.
Absolutely. Well, the other thing is, now that you can put a mask on any of the help, I mean, quality can, just plummet without any loss of customer satisfaction.
I've got this article that you sent me, Ollie, and it says, a cluster of 18, 10 of them were show pub and nightclub employees or customers. And some of the other people in this cluster were people who dined with these customers, looks like some company employees. And the infection started spreading from there. And I was wondering, if there could be anything more embarrassing than being a salaryman and getting the Shingata coronavirus at a hostess club. And I found something more embarrassing. It's being an ALT and getting it at the hub.
I saw that. Oh, my God.
Both equally disgusting places that you'd be embarrassed to be found at.
In Sendai, in Miyagi-Ken.
For listeners that aren't aware, we're talking about hostess clubs, and hostess club is a euphemism for a club where naughty things happen.
Not even. Hostess clubs, not even. Hostess clubs are like you pay a woman to engage with you socially and maybe like touch your knee and flirt and laugh at your jokes.
But isn't the hub exactly that in reverse? That it's where people that want to interact with foreigners in a way that's akin to a zoo. They know that's where they can go, and they're all kind of in one place just in case it kicks off. And the hub is kind of known as, for British listeners, it's got the same vibe as a Wetherspoons. I'm trying to think of for a
it's like a TGI Fridays bar, like the Chili's bar. It's
maybe
like
an Applebee's,
right.
Yeah,
Applebee's bar, yeah. It's like where the sad people go to drink.
So there's a cluster of cases that were reported to a hub, and regrettably, this has led to more xenophobia.
No, it's foreigners are bringing it in. Foreigners are spreading it. But don't worry, Japan's on top of it. They announced this today, and it was not an April Fool's joke. The Abe administration, one thing that they're going to do is they're going to send every household in Japan 2 masks.
Derek, what are you going to do with your masks?
Oh, yeah. What am I not going to do with my masks? That's what you should be asking.
Can I guess protect yourself from coronavirus with them? That's one thing that you'll probably not be doing with them.
Have we found out what kind of masks these are? Are these going to be like LDP branded or have the Japanese national flag on them or something?
Only this, just worse than that. They're going to be cotton or some kind of fabric. And then everybody was linking the WHO saying, like, never use a fabric mask.
One thing that I saw in the article was that the Japanese government was promoting the use of these like cloth masks because you can wash them and reuse them. Another one of the TV shows that I work for, they did a segment on how to properly wash and sanitize and reuse a homemade cloth mask. And
thank goodness you said mask and not hostess.
Right. You have to soak it in soap for I think they said soak it in soap for 2 hours and then soak it in bleach for 2 hours and then rinse it out. And then it's okay to wash it in with your laundry. And you have to do that between every daily use. So that's like with a Japanese laundry machine and drying, that's like 6 to 8 hours of cleaning to reuse a mask daily.
Something to do in it.
Yeah.
Derek, you've been following the legal constraints of the Japanese government. What can they actually do to halt the spread of this virus?
Right. Everybody was really confused. Why isn't the Japanese government doing a lockdown like we see all these other countries doing? So I read the whole law that kind of governs the special measures that can be taken when there's a new kind of influenza, as the law says, and then they added COVID-19 to that. But basically, they can order businesses to do things after they've requested once and the business says no. And then there's also an emergency, then they can order a business and really force it. But with individuals, they just can't. So ultimately, it's a really, really strong request that you can flout and
that's because the Japanese Constitution, as written by the Americans, prizes freedom of assembly, and there are certain inalienable rights which can't be limited by the by regular legislation. Oh yes, I've got a law degree.
You're only gonna go to so one. The whole, and even to be able to make official requests from a governor to their citizens of their prefecture to, stay in or whatever, or take whatever action the governor wants them to take, they have to already have an emergency declaration in place to issue that official, hey, stay home thing. And then it really isn't. There's no compelling, by government of people. And the funny thing in this whole thing is, everybody, not everybody, but so many people really dislike Abe and his government, and they've got plenty of reasons.
Not me, I got 2 free masks.
But until, yeah, right. But now you've got 2 free masks, so, everybody's going to stop now with the criticism. But, it's like, the funny thing is, until this virus appeared, everything Abe did was the road to fascism, the road to authoritarianism in Japan, the end of democracy. And now people who have to this point hated Abe are like, why doesn't Abe enact a police state in our cities? And it's the funniest thing to watch.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I actually saw that they were moving towards they were trying to set something up. They were trying to change the law in some way so that they would have the legal ability to enforce a lockdown. And in my mind, I was like, okay, one more step on the road to becoming a nationalist, borderline fascist government. But you're saying the Japanese response that you've seen is like they want those measures enacted.
No, well, who I'm referring to is mostly, like the Gaijin commentariat, maybe, what's with this government? Why don't they do this? And these are the same people who, up to this point have been really critical of government overreach. And so it's generally that. But in Japan, there's always going to be a super polarized set of people who are like, lock everything down, give the government the keys to the kingdom. And then there's always people who, Abe picks up a pair of chopsticks. He's trying to oppress me.
Let's do it bit by bit. Let's start by just closing the hubs, locking them and throwing away the key.
I was going to say, I've noticed a similar thing in America where all along the way, all the Trump supporters have been, we don't want any socialism. We don't want any socialism. We can't handle any socialism. And now all of a sudden it's government's bailing out all of the businesses. And also we need stimulus money. And also we've lost our jobs. Give us money, give us money. Like, that's socialism.
Capitalism only works when socialism rises its ugly head once a generation to fix it.
As we drive on our freeways and subsidize.
They're not free. They're toll roads. That's how we impose a lockdown. We have hub level prices on the toll roads. No one can afford to move.
Well, it's funny, that you actually mentioned that. And the roads, the main highways in Japan are privatized now. So that is actually a lever that the government could mess with if they declared emergency and had an urgent need. They could shut down the highways, those highways.
What else do you think they could actually do?
Yeah, so here are some of the quick things they could do. They could take over a love hotel and turn it into a hospital. So you'd have like a swirly bath while you're getting over the virus. They can expropriate land. And that's actually one of the individual rights they can infringe on is they can just take your land if you refuse to offer it for hospital, building or whatever. They can do mass burials in an emergency declaration situation. If the undertakers can't keep up.
I'm in favor of the turning love hotels into treatment centers. If only because I have been to love hotels and I know they sell a variety of masks on site.
I think the last thing I'd want to see coming out of a coma is looking up and seeing the mirror above my bed. Hey, thanks again for tuning into Japan by River Cruise. And thanks sincerely to everybody who's bought us a coffee. Particularly in this time of lockdown, it's more important than ever that we are caffeinated. And what's cool is the platform that we use don't impose their fees during this month. So if you've enjoyed any of our previous podcasts and think that they're worth the price of a coffee, then please do buy us one. I'm now unwell, so I'm not going to be sharing my coffee with Bobby for health and safety reasons. If you'd like to follow us or our guest, then Derek, please remind us of your Twitter handle.
I'm DWVCD.
All right, thank you again for joining us. I've been Bobby Judo along with Ollie Horn and our guest, Derek Wessman. See you guys next week.